Hi, my name is Kate Bonnen, and I am a postdoc at New York University in New York City. And I'm going to be a TA at Neuromatch Academy this summer. And I created this video to show people how to get started on the Python tutorials using Google Colab, which is the environment that we're going to be doing our programming in at Neuromatch Academy. So why don't we go ahead and dive in? I'm going to share my screen. And so this document is our How to Prepare for Neuromatch Academy Python edition document. And we recommend that you go ahead and get started with a Python programming course from Software Carpentries. And like I said, we're going to be relying on Google Colab to do our Python programming. So it would be great if you could do these Python tutorials in that environment. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Google Colab. And whenever you go to colab.research.google.com, it will take you here. There's a number of ways you could open up a new notebook, but we're going to go ahead and just click this button in the right-hand corner for new notebook. It will give us a blank notebook, which we can rename. I'm going to rename this one Python tutorial. And in every notebook, there are these cells, and you can type code into cells. So I'm x equals 3. Here is some example code. And let's print out y. And once you've written a few lines of code, you can run that code by clicking play here. And then it printed out the value of y. Or instead of clicking play, you can click Shift Enter. And that will also run the cell and jump to the next cell. Now, there are two kinds of cells that you can have in Google Colab: a code cell, which I just made one of, and a text cell. So if I were to put a text cell here, this would allow me to leave notes. During Neuromatch Academy, the tutorials you do in Google Colab notebooks will often have a lot of instructions and information in the text cells. So here, I'm just going to leave a note. Above is my first code cell. And again, I can press Shift Enter to go to the next cell. But what we really came here to do was get started on the tutorials in Google Colab. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to that How to Prepare document and open up the Python tutorial. So this Python tutorial was created by Software Carpentry, and they are an organization that is dedicated to helping researchers learn technical skills like programming in Python. And this introduction to Python is actually built around the scientific task of data analysis. And we'll be looking at a data set that describes arthritis inflammation in a whole bunch of patients that have been given a new treatment for arthritis. And so we're going to learn a bit of programming in order to be able to analyze this data. And the data itself is structured. The data is stored in a data file called a CSV file, a comma separated values file. CSV refers to the format the data is stored in. So as you might imagine, the data in the file is separated by commas. Each row here is a single patient's data, and each entry in the row is 1 day of information for a particular patient. And what we can do, what we want to do with this data is to calculate the average inflammation per day across all the patients and be able to plot this data so that we can visualize it and talk about it. And so all of the lessons in this course are designed around that exercise of analyzing that data and plotting it. But before we dive into the course and go back to Google Colab, one thing that we do need to do is actually download the data associated with this set of exercises. So we're going to click on Setup and navigate to the Lesson Materials section and go ahead and download the Python novice inflammation data file. We can unzip that file. And then we'll have all of the data that we need right there, all downloaded. So now we can go ahead and go back to the course and get started with Python fundamentals. Now that we've downloaded that data set, we can go ahead and import it into Google Colab. And in order to do this, we'll type in 2 lines of code. The first is from google.colab import files. And the second line is files.upload. And when we run this line, this cell, it's going to ask us to actually choose the files we would want to upload. And we'll navigate to wherever you stored that downloaded that data file and go ahead and select all of the .csv files that you see, inflammation 1 through 12 and small 1 through 3, and click open. This will actually load the data into Google Colab so that you can treat these files like files that you might have on your desktop, but within Google Colab. The only thing I'll say about this is that if you shut this Google Colab notebook down, like close your browser and go away and then come back, you are going to have to rerun this cell to get your data back into Google Colab so that you can interact with it. All right, so now we can go ahead and start the tutorial. So we're going to go back to the tutorial and click on Python Fundamentals. Now, each of these individual lessons within the course are sort of set up the same way. There's an overview at the top that describes the overarching questions that they'll be addressing in this particular section, and then some objectives, things that you should understand or know how to do at the end of this lesson. So one thing I would recommend is that if you have 2 screens or have the ability to put the lesson up on another screen, that could be really useful. As that's not possible for me right at this moment, I'm actually just going to split these 2 things and put my Colab over here and my instructions over here. Okay, so now we're just going to come down here and we're going to add a code block and start to follow along in the tutorial. So the point they're making here in the first code block is that a Python interpreter can be used as an overpowered calculator. So I can type in 3 plus 5 times 4, and I can run this cell either by pressing play again or doing Shift Enter. And look at that. I'm getting the same output as they're getting. And that's great, but maybe not very interesting. To do anything useful with data, we have to assign that value to a variable. And we can do that using the equal sign. So we have weight kilogram, and we want to set that equal to 60. And again, we can run that cell. And now anywhere we use weight kilogram, that's like using the value 60. And so this is what we're going to do, or what we suggest that you do, rather. We suggest that you work through these tutorials, typing out what you find in the Python boxes. Sometimes it'll be descriptions of things you should do. Sometimes it will actually be just chunks of code, and work your way through the information that they give you and the exercises they provide. As you work through each lesson, as you get to the bottom, there will be items that are actually more like exercises. and they tend to be in these brown or yellow, orangish colored boxes. And they will have some instructions up here and possibly some code. And then if you come down here and click on the arrow, you'll be able to see the solution. And then the only other thing I want to point out is that as you get into the second lesson, that is where you will start actually using the data that we loaded into Google Colab before. You can see here, because we loaded those files into Google Colab, you'll now be able to run this line here that's going to let you actually grab the data from the files and interact with it in Python. And so that's basically all I wanted to show you guys, was how to get started with these Python tutorials in Google Colab. So I hope you have fun getting started with Python, refreshing your Python skills, and I'll see you at Neuromatch Academy.